cases in favor of corporations over people. It's very scandalous. I think we should impeach a few Supreme Court justices. Also, that decision overturns a 100-year history of it used to be a felony for corporations to influence elections, and for it to just ignore 100 years of history with that decision, it's just outrageous. I had a radio show, and there was a guy who actually walked across the country the most he had done politically before was put up a yard sign, and he was so thoroughly outraged. He was like 70 years old. He walked across the country in protest.
Okay, and William?
Well, it's a terrible decision, but we shouldn't just shrug our shoulders and think that we need to amend the Constitution, because even if money is speech, we can regulate speech. We can regulate time, place, and manner. Speech is regulated. So we can still regulate money, and we need to do that. But also, I know this is kind of like a broken record, but this is my message. If we impose term limits on our elected officials, they will be more interested in representing the voters than they will be in getting reelected, and they won't be catering to special interests and their money.
Now I have a very easy question here for you, and I'll start with you, William. What will you do to create jobs for the 10 million unemployed?
Okay, well, I'll take that as a question about the economy. First of all, there's a lot of things that we need to do for the economy. We need a fair taxation system where everybody pays their share. We need to cut defense spending, and we need to stop the war in Afghanistan, and we need to end our dependency on oil. As long as we're dependent on oil, we'll never have a recovery. We started to have a recovery a few months ago. The price of gas went up, and the recovery stalled. And it's not supply and demand. You can't drill your way out of it. Supply is regulated by OPEC, so we need to get away from oil. Now we need a jobs bill that rebuilds infrastructure, rebuilds schools, funds educations, teachers, firemen, police officers. We need to create jobs and construction on the infrastructure.
Dave?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, the problem we've had so far has been that when Obama had that stimulus bill, I think that most people who are knowledgeable about macroeconomics were of the opinion that a 4% stimulus was not going to do very much against an economy with 9% unemployment. And in the event, it didn't do much. And I remember people saying, half a loaf is better than none. Now, what I told them was, half a car won't get you anywhere. We can create a lot of jobs in this country as long as we do two things. The first thing is that the Federal Reserve has been increasing the money supply these last 10 years in these various bailouts and stimulus quantitative easing programs, and it's all been in the form of debt. That's why the debt-to-equity ratio in every sector of the economy is at historical levels. We need to tax the Fed or have the Fed declare a dividend. Doesn't matter where it goes exactly, but it has to be in the form of equity capital rather than debt. The debt problem in this country can only be solved by creating equity. And in terms of, putting the people to work, I go to every public school around here looks like a trailer park. It's insane. We've got unemployed construction workers, 6-8 million of them, and we can put them to work building schools. It's very easy.
Carol?
We live in the wealthiest nation, yet the local, state, federal governments are facing budget crisis and cutting services. No one's been held accountable for the largest financial heist in history. The recession is an allocation problem. Less than 1% own the majority of wealth. If we took back the ill-gotten gains and required state-chartered corporations to serve the public interest, we wouldn't be in this mess. Our money system has a profound effect on our lives. Stephen Zarlenga, a historian of money, says, over time, whoever controls the money system controls the nation. Wall Street has privatized our money system. The big banks are licensed to print money. They issue 90% of the money supply. Is it any surprise that Wall Street runs the country? Money's value comes from society, so the way to issue money is through a government which provides real services to all and removes the national debt tax burden off the middle class and the working poor. H.R. 2990 does that. We could pay off the national debt, we can fund national health care program, close the state budget gaps, fund tuition-free higher education, provide a basic income guarantee to the unemployed, and end inflation if we take back the power to print money from the banks. We have lots of people. There's no reason we can't put them to work doing things that we need desperately. We should be able to solve this problem if we solve the who creates money problem. And a debt-based system always concentrates wealth and power, destroying empires in the process, usually when they wipe out their ecological base. We have to get away from that, create money as a public utility to serve us.
William.
Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry. Then we're down to Dave. I'm sorry, I was keeping good notes here.
What? I think you're on the next question.
All right. What is your stance on the current level of funding and use of the military? And Dave, we'll start with you.
Yes. Well, I'm about the only Republican around here who's in favor of major defense cuts. But I'm in favor of very specific defense cuts. I believe that the United States Army is more or less useless from a national security point of view. But we do need a Navy. We are a natural sea power. The United States is essentially a great big island. And funny thing about land warfare is somebody can get holed up in the mountains and two Boy Scouts can hold off a division in the right terrain. But there's no oceans that have hills in them. The U.S. Navy, we need to spend more money on the Navy, especially on unmanned aerial platforms and certain other platforms. And we need to continue to maintain superiority in Air Force, space, and cyber warfare assets. But the Army should be stabilized at about 20% of its current staffing levels. We began World War II with 200,000 men in the Army, and we won. We began the Vietnam War with 2 million guys in the Army, and we lost. There is no evidence that a large peacetime military is beneficial when the bullets start to fly. In fact, the evidence is that the sort of person who becomes a middle-ranking officer in a peacetime military is the last guy you want running the thing when there's a war on.
Carol?
I think the military budget is obscene, and we need to redirect all those resources and that human intellectual power towards solving the real problems that humanity faces at this time. We definitely need to cut the military budget, especially things like the cost overrun programs like Halliburton. What they did in Iraq is absolutely scandalous. We need to redirect our resources to improving the health, improving the environment, not destroying the planet, threatening people, robbing them of their resources.
Okay, and William.
50% of our tax revenue goes to defense, 2% goes to education. And 40% of those tax dollars going for defense is borrowed money. So it's undermining the stability of our country more than it is adding to the stability of this country. We need to stop the military madness that has gripped this country, and we need to stop the influence that the military-industrial complex has on Washington, D.C.
All right, this next question addresses transportation. Funding for public transportation is limited. How do you feel about greater emphasis on public transit? And we'll start with Carol.
I think we should have a better public transportation structure, and there's many cities which have model transportation systems that we could learn from. It's a shame that the system in Los Angeles was destroyed by our automobile companies in collusion with one another, and they forced us all into cars and onto the highways. I think we need to reclaim the streets so that we actually have a decent public transportation system and try to reduce the cars.
Okay, Dave?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that I think the high-speed rail proposal is an idiotic waste of money. I've said it before, I'll probably say it again. From a general point of view, rubber wheel transport is more flexible and seems to be cheaper than steel wheel transport, and this back to the future idea that we're going to go putting up railroad tracks all over the place is just not going to work out. The best public transit system I personally have ever seen was in Bogota, Colombia. People who have been there say that Sao Paulo, Brazil, has the best public transport system in the world. Both of these are based upon rubber-wheeled vehicles. The system in Colombia relies on a mixture of buses, colectivos, and taxis. A colectivo is a minibus. For the United States, the most immediately useful thing we could do is to legalize jitneys. You know, we used to have a system where people would drive in a minivan and they'd go to like a bus stop and pick people up, charge them $5. The practical result of jitney buses is that these are people who are acting as part-time bus drivers, and a little more organized than a carpool, but they only are doing it during rush hour, which is, of course, when you really need to get people out of their individual cars. So legalize jitneys.
We need mass transit. We need to reduce our carbon footprint, and we need to get off of oil. And so we need to invest in all types of mass transit. Clean, efficient biodiesel buses. I think we would benefit from a high-speed train in California, and I hope that goes through. We need to do anything we can to get off of oil.
All right, this question is, do you support a woman's right to choose health and reproductive choices? And Dave, we'll start with you.
Yes. It's none of the government's business. You know, we over at the Republican Party occasionally have discussions of the form, can we throw that guy out of the party? I'm not going to name names, but a lot of them live in Virginia.
William?
I support a woman's right to choose, and this is being threatened from the right, and not just the right to choose, but also reproductive rights and birth control. And it's a very important issue, and we need to do everything we can to protect a woman's rights to choose.
And Carol?
Yes, definitely.
All right, here's another very easy one. What would you like to do about climate change? And Carol, we'll start with you.
I think we have to do everything we can to rein in the oil industry as well as the nuclear industry and put most of our resources towards renewables. I also think we need to reform our patent system because our patent system has been repressing technologies which could solve a lot of our energy needs, and other countries can leapfrog over the United States because of the strength of the nuclear industry and the oil industry in this country, so that we can't actually access a lot of these technologies just because of the patent system. It's so prohibitive for really innovative technologies.
Okay, Dave?
Well, I'm not a fan of nuclear power. I think that trading in carbon dioxide emissions for radon, krypton, and xenon emissions is a poor trade-in. What we need to do at the end of the day is we need to have a carbon tax. And I know that this is politically very, very difficult, but the proposed cap and trade is a fiasco. it's a big scam, and it's not going to work. And the proposed cap and trade it's just one of these things where it's designed to create the appearance, oh yes, we care about climate change. But as a practical matter, if you had a carbon tax, what would happen is that coal use would drop dramatically, oil use would stay the same, and natural gas use would increase. But a carbon tax is the way to do it. Use market principles. The command and control approach will not work either. And, you know, right now, you look at the amount of foot dragging that we're having over just very common sense regulations. The United Nations keeps having these things, and yet India is subsidizing kerosene and diesel fuel for its lots of poor people over there. Various third world countries are subsidizing their population consuming petroleum products. You know, it's not just the United States. We need to have an international treaty prohibiting these kind of subsidies.
All right, and William.
Climate change is a real problem. We need to do everything we can to reduce our carbon footprint. Solar on every roof and electric in every garage would be a good start. But we must come up with renewable energy and sustainable resources and stop using petroleum products.
All right. These get easier and easier. What do you think about expanding Medicare to cover all? Medicare is already in place. And we'll start with William.
I think that's a great idea. And I think one way we can start is by allowing a buy-in for people, say, from 55 up to 65. Let them buy in to the program. Or it might even be better to start at 45, because at 45, I think, you know, if you notice in Silicon Valley, the workforce is younger and younger and younger, and it stays younger. And the reason it's going to stay young is because a major cost of the employers is the cost of medical insurance. And what determines the cost of the medical insurance is the age of the employee. And I just know this has to be having influence on the workforce. Now, if a 45-year-old man or woman could buy into Medicare, then they could go out and take a job that didn't require health insurance. This would help the employer, and this would help the workforce. And in addition, Medicare is working. It's a single payer program that is working. So we need to start expanding these. We also need to expand the Veterans Administration. That we should let veterans' families buy in also.
Carol.
I think single payer would be superior, but if we couldn't get single payer, I could see expanding Medicare to reach more people. Also, I think Congress has a fairly decent healthcare program, and that could be expanded greatly. That would probably be a good solution.
I don't think that was the question. Dave.
Well, members of Congress as a group are healthier than the average American. You have to be to go to all these meetings.